Good afternoon, party people. This is Scott Schertzen alongside Mr. Obi Spencer and Mr. JD Walker, and this is Spanglish World Sports Den's The Sports Den. Welcome to Spanglish Sports World on Zingo TV channel 250. Make sure to download the Zingo TV app on the app stores of iOS and Android devices. When you download, though, make sure to rate and leave a comment. They want to hear from you. They want to learn a little bit more about how they can make the app better. By the way, the app is free, so you can't beat the price. Zingo TV is, by the way, also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
I'm great. I'm stupendous. I think you called me a hipster in our meeting, but you might have called JD a hipster. I was zoning out.
I was actually talking JD down there.
He was calling me a hipster. Probably it's probably the beard and the mustache.
And that whole ginger thing that you got going, I dig it. I really do. You know, mildly jealous with all this. So, but yeah, we got a bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about. Thank you, by the way, Obi. I appreciate you running point last week. I wasn't available for it, so you rocked that out. I'm really grateful there. By the way, yes, I'm trying to actually point to people a little bit more than I used to, so I'm kind of enjoying that. Anyway, we got to talk some serious NFL right now. We're closing in on pretty much the last month of the season, and playoff picture is starting to take root. We're going to be talking a little bit of Major League Baseball lockout. As always, this show is available, like I said, on Zingo TV and also available on all Spanglish World Network devices. You can actually find us also on Tales from the Film Set on Instagram, on Facebook, and
too many shows, too many plugs.
There we go. SSW Sports Day. All right. You know where to find us anyway. Okay. By the way, Obi, thank you for not saying anything. I realized it as soon as I said it. But anyway, we got that show we're going to talk about a little bit later and all the meltdowns happening with Seth Rogen. But anyway, NFL. We're going to be talking a little Jets right here. We're going to be talking a little Giants right here. We're going to be talking Cardinals because actually that team now has Kyler Murray back up in the lineup. Props to Colt McCoy for doing a fantastic job as a backup. Last night, also, we started to see a little bit more take shape with the Bills losing, frankly, a very interesting game to the Patriots, where the Patriots only attempted 3 passes. So, Obi, let me start off with you, sir. Give me your thoughts. Give me some ideas. Where you at, man?
Well, I've had a lot of time to digest that Bills game. First of all, I'm really, really irked that they threw it the additional 2 times towards the end of the game. There was no need to do it. And, I would have been more spectacular to watch them do that with only 1 run. But that's really not strategic or anything other than just fans' folly and joy. I think that the Bills are getting hammered. I mean, look, you are what your record says you are. I think it's going to be nearly impossible for the Bills to catch the Patriots. And JD was high on the Patriots earlier when the season started, so kudos to him. I'm just looking at
one of the only things I got right in my predictions at the start of the season.
If that field goal attempt at the end of the fourth quarter is just nudged in, how are we talking about this differently? I talk a lot about how running backs are replaceable. Certainly, if you have a really crappy running back, he's not going to be an NFL running back. But it's very easy to have next man up mentality at the running back position. And there's lots of folks who talk about how running the ball doesn't really increase your chances of winning each play. And you kind of saw that yesterday. I mean, they dominated the ground game. They were definitively the better team. They rushed for 220-something yards, and they were barely winning that game. Now, part of that was those are the choices that were made, but it really makes you question. Just to me, the bigger takeaway wasn't the game, but wow. Now you see why they're so high on passing and why passing is so important, because everything about that game should have been a blowout, and yet it was super tight, and arguably the Bills should have been in position to win the game.
I think it's crazy that that this was able to happen. I mean, it was primarily the weather that dictated this, 60-mile-an-hour winds, Buffalo in December, just gross weather. Leave it to Bill Belichick to come up with a game plan from 1921 to win a game in 2021 when you have a quarterback who, up until a few years ago, had never seen snow. He grew up in Florida and played at Alabama. Yet he went into Buffalo and handed the ball off and won.
Mm-hmm.
And Belichick probably knew that and didn't want him exposed playing in nasty conditions like that. So the game plan was just handed off a bunch, and it worked. This is what I mean when I say you can never count out the Patriots. Yes, I watch the Patriots a little too much because I see them beat the snot out of my team twice a year for the past 20 years, and more than that now. Yikes!
And the pain they're in year after year, yeah.
So just this, Belichick is the best to come up with a game plan like that. Mac Jones is looking like the best of the rookie quarterbacks by far so far because he's playing for Belichick. I mean, we'll see what happens with Lawrence. Wilson looked a little better. Wilson looked less crappy. That's about the only good takeaway from the Jets this past week.
Let me ask you something. Something came up in a conversation. I want to ask JD this specifically. Tua is starting to show his value, and Miami a couple times has actually tried to trade. Would you consider, or is it too early to say? Would you consider maybe dropping Zach Wilson for Tua? Or take it a step further, if the answer to that is no, who would you actually be willing to trade for if it meant getting rid of Zach Wilson?
I don't want to get rid of Zach Wilson. I just don't think given what happens with the Jets chewing up and spitting out rookie quarterbacks, I don't have any confidence. And I said this from the first show I did with you guys, the draft preview. I said, I do not have the confidence in the Jets to make this work. It's maybe looking a little better than Darnold. I don't even know anymore. That they need to fix the offensive line again because the stud left tackle they drafted is currently losing the battle of attrition to the scale. He was injured in week 1 in what was supposed to be a 6-week injury, but hasn't come back at all. The issue is the weight problems. And when they had an offensive lineman go down on Sunday, and Van Roten came back in, the line went down the tubes again. And that's before we even get into the abysmal defense, the worst defense in the NFL, run by the supposed defensive genius Robert Saleh, who was shocked and didn't plan for Gardner Minshew, even though the whole week they were saying, high ankle, anybody who even had Hurts on a fantasy team. Apparently the Jets don't check RotoWire when making their game plans to know which quarterback to play for. I'm done with this team. They're not worth my time at this point in December, and neither are the Giants for you, for that matter.
Well, yeah, we've accepted that now that the Giants are going to, bringing in a third string now because your first one and second one are out. Interestingly enough, looking back at the numbers as far as the sacks go, because sacks is a great statistic when it comes to looking at judging an offensive line. The Jets right now are the 4th worst in the NFL since 2019 with sacks. Surprisingly, actually only 4th. I expected them to actually be a lot higher up that list.
There's a lot of bad lines in the offense, and there's a lot of bad offensive lines in the NFL.
And sacks are not necessarily an offensive line stat. Pressure is an offensive line stat.
Yes,
sacks is a quarterback.
In my case right now, with the 30 seconds that I had to pull it up, I had to pull
I
up
understand that. I want our audience to know that at least one of us is aware of this fact.
Fair. But in this case, like I said, as I'm trying to pull up, stuff right on the fly right now, I figured sacks would be the fastest way that I can type this in. Would you care to take a stab, though? There are 3 teams since 2019 that have given up more sacks. By the way, same number of games played, more than the Jets have. Would you care to take a stab at 3 of those teams?
Bengals, Giants.
Yes, no.
Really?
So yes to the Bengals, right?
Yes to the Bengals, no to the Giants. Giants are actually like 9th if I had to guess it.
Detroit.
Nope.
I'm going to say Jacksonville.
Yeah, that was going to
No.
be my next guess as well.
No, I don't even see Jacksonville like the top 10 here. Houston's number 2, and Seattle is number 1. The Seahawks have given up 135 sacks in 44 games. So, yeah, who would have thought that
And
one?
you wonder why Wilson wants to get out of there.
Jeez, yeah. I mean, he's not as young as he used to be, but he needs to be in a situation where he can protect himself a little bit more. And now, again, you're dealing with a running quarterback, so that's part of the problem that you've got there a little bit. But yeah, believe it or not, most sacks given up, them.
I can't believe I forgot Houston and how bad and how long Watson holds the football for, and how he's been out. He's out of the league for a year, and the memory of the fact that he won't throw a football, and the fact that I know that it's the crazy thing is the reason I know sacks are a quarterback stat. It's about Houston and how Watson would go out and they wouldn't give up sacks anymore, and Watson was the cause of understanding that, and I forgot Houston.
Now, if you want to go back it's okay. If you want to go back to last year, this is your punishment. The team that's given up the most sacks since the beginning of last season, the Eagles. So there you go.
Yes.
If it makes you feel any better, if you want to have any level of punishment for your gaffe right there, your team has the most sacks given up by the offensive line. So
I was aware of that in the last 2 years. That I knew. You went to 19. I had to. That's why 2019. That's an extra year.
In fairness, the Eagles' offensive line has been absolutely decimated by injuries over the past 2 seasons.
Yes.
But like I said, in this case, that's where your team stands right now. The Jets, the Giants, the Eagles, all teams. I mean, the Eagles at least are close. I think right now they're about half a game out of at least a wild card spot. Washington right now and San Francisco are right now tied at 6-6. And there are, I believe, 6 other teams that are currently 5 other teams that are currently vying for those 2 spots. So there's a lot to be said for what's happening in the NFC. And I have to wonder in this case, and I'm going to turn this back over to you guys in a sec, is it just quirk of the year, or is maybe the way it's a 17-game schedule possibly having some impact on why it's so close now in December?
I think it's part of it is just the general mediocrity of the entire league. Even the supposedly good teams don't look like world beaters. The Patriots have been playing better lately, and they have momentum heading towards the playoffs, as does Kansas City. And the Cardinals have been very impressive. There's so many teams that you could make a case for how they could either win a Super Bowl or miss the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
The 17-game season is part of it. COVID is a part of it, especially if coming out of the weirdness of last season, and some of that continuing into this season, even though with somewhat more normalcy, but there's still some hiccups here and there. So the whole league has been. It feels like something is off. Like there's some, why does and it's the things that require more practice and more cohesion to try and execute well at. There's so much sloppy play all around the league. So many bad offensive lines, bad quarterback play, bad kicking. The worst kicking I can remember seeing in my life.
Remember you venting something about that with when it comes to kicking in general, how badly you'd love to have Nick Folk back.
Yeah, even retired Jay Feely working for CBS would probably do a better job, after not playing in the league for several years than some of the kickers that the Jets have brought through this year.
So I'm going to offer a different perspective in that the reason things are weird in terms of the standings is because we do not believe in the Arizona Cardinals. That is my opinion. This is a 10-2 team. They lost one game with the backup quarterback, and the other game they lost, their wide receiver and their quarterback were not on the same page for one play, and it happened to be the last play of the game. I just went to last year, which I know is another year that's kind of weird, but there was 2 11-1 teams. But the NFC East, remember how good the NFC East was last year? The leader was 5-7 at this point. So talk about mediocrity. I mean, all divisions are going to produce a 10-team, if not 11-game winner, I feel, at this point. I think that we're getting confused with the fact that there's an extra wild card team and what that's doing to the bad teams and increasing their chances.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. It's that extra wild. Oh, everybody's – no, like they're not everybody's – the 49ers aren't in it. They're in it for the last spot of the wild card with Washington. And because there's an extra spot, we can still talk about the Vikings and still talk about the Eagles. But if Washington upsets the Cowboys this week and the 49ers upset – or I don't know who they're playing with, the 49ers also win. Now both those teams are 2 games up on the Eagles, and it's a bigger gap. So I think we're getting some things confused in our mind. We're not appreciating the Cardinals, and we're thinking everything's closer because there's one more team that gets in. But the same 5 teams in the NFC have been the teams to beat for almost 4 or 5 weeks now, because even with the Rams skid, they're still better than everybody else who's in below them. There's still a gap, and the Rams had a big skid. So at least in the NFC, I think we're discombobulating these extra wild card spots with the better cream of the crop teams, and I just don't think. I think Arizona is the most underrated team I've seen in a long time.
Well, part of the reason
I agree with that, and the sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say part of the reason for that is because this team has struggled through mediocrity for really the last 5 seasons prior. They haven't had a winning season in the past 5 years going into this year. You're looking at, like, say, for example, offensive rank. They were at 25th, 32, 16, and then last year 13. Defensive rank 19, 26, 28, 12. So you saw a little bit of an improvement there, but there's been a lot of cellar dweller bottom numbers there. And the last 4 seasons, they were in 3rd place or 4th place in all 4 of those seasons. So out of nowhere, they have basically taken off. And now 3rd overall in offense, 4th overall in defense, number 1 overall in touchdowns per game. I mean, this is a powerhouse team, but I think part of it is the fact that we're not used to it yet. So we're used to seeing a mediocre team. So it almost feels, I hate to use the phrase in this case, Cinderella in some ways for a 10-2 team, but I don't think people have embraced them as a powerhouse yet because of what the last 5 seasons have been for them. JD?
You need playoff experience matters, and the Cardinals do not have that yet. And the past 2 seasons, they got off to a hot starts and faded towards the end. Now this appears to be the first time they're sustaining it all the way through. They managed to stay above water, going 3-1 with Colt McCoy as quarterback while Murray was out. So I do consider them a real deal contender. I don't know if I'm not sold on them as Super Bowl contenders just yet. I mean, by record, yes, they are, but once you get to the playoffs, experience plays more of a role. So does that happen down the stretch? It could, but I would not be surprised if a team like the Packers picks them off.
The NFC Championship
are playing at Cincinnati this weekend to answer that question from before.
I would love, Scott, for you to do some research. I don't know. This is the kind of thing where we don't really have the time, I think. But number of times a quarterback has won the Super Bowl or made it to the Super Bowl in his first playoff appearance. I know Troy Aikman.
Okay.
Russell Wilson, I'm sure. We also have Big Ben, I believe, got in. Tom Brady, his first playoff second. So I'm not sure about that experience narrative in football. Like, we know that's true in basketball. Like, older teams win in basketball and football. I'm not as sure. And there are lots of weapons on this team. Most of them don't have any experience in professional football championship games. So that is true. But I think that goes into the perception of the Cardinals that we're just not buying in. We want to believe that if we watch the media are being told that the team to beat is Tom Brady, because we've been told that for 20 years. And it's been for 20 years.
It's been right for 20 years.
Right. So that's keeping our perception of the Cardinals down. And look, the Buccaneers could go through and crush them. the Green Bay Packers could beat them a second time. I'm not making them my Super Bowl pick because that's not what we're doing today, but I just feel like we should be talking about them as if they're the favorite, and we are talking about two other teams that are the favorites over them, and that is condensing, going back to the original question, condensing the sense of, or increasing the sense of parity when along the top of the NFC, there is no parity. Even when the Cowboys lose a stinker or the Rams lose a stinker, they're not losing, and with all due apologies to JD and you, Scott, they're not losing to the Jets, the Giants, and Houston and Detroit like Minnesota just did. They're losing to those teams that are losing to those teams, but they're not losing to the absolute bottom of the barrel.
Below end of the now,
you get that in the AFC though.
I
with
looked this
the
up.
Titans losing to the Jets, and
Yes.
And as for the quarterbacks, Obi, you mentioned Roethlisberger and Wilson. They both won Super Bowls in year 2. They made the playoffs as rookies, but like the Steelers actually had. I believe they went 15-1 Roethlisberger's rookie season and lost in the playoffs. I don't remember if it was the first round or the AFC Championship game. And then in year 2 is the 6th seed. That won all their games on the road. That's when they won the Super Bowl. So that builds up 1 year of playoff experience.
2 starters in their first year have won a Super Bowl. I did look it up now. Tom Brady and Kurt Warner. Typically in the playoffs, rookie quarterbacks have a .355 winning percentage. So that says a lot right up to that. And because in fairness, they don't have the experience there. For right now, looking at the way things are panning out, I think it's conceivable that the Cardinals could get to the NFC Championship.
Yes.
But that championship is going to go through either Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. Tom Brady right now has, I think it's a 611 win percentage on the road. I gotta look it up. I think he's something like a 611 win percentage. And then Ben Roethlisberger has like a 540 or something like that in career on the road. So either one of those teams will probably have to host. And if the other team has to play, it's going to be a challenge for that opposing starting quarterback right off the bat. If this ends up going through home field on this, whichever team actually, basically, here's my prediction, as I'm rambling a little bit. Whichever one of those 2 teams hosts the NFC Championship will go to the Super Bowl. Their record at home is too strong. And my opinion is it's going to go through one of those 2 teams. Whichever one it is, they're the one that's going to be winning the NFC and going to the Super Bowl. My question is, who is that other team going to be? And now at this point, I'll be honest. Let me just say this one thing. At this point, I'm not sold on Dallas like I was a few weeks ago. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
I agree with that. But hypothetically, I could see, let's say, Tampa going on the road to Arizona and beating the Cardinals, and then you setting up a Tampa Green Bay NFC Championship game, which by record, I believe, as it currently stands, would be in Green Bay. So in that case, it would be, even with, that's about the one thing that's the one thing that Tom Brady hasn't done, because he hasn't had a chance to until now, is win a playoff game on the road in Green Bay. Obviously, since it's Tom Brady, it can happen, but the numbers for the Packers playing deep in the playoffs at home heavily favor the Packers.
Aaron Rodgers has about an 800 or 820 win percentage at home for his career. So that's what you're going up against. And Tom Brady's pretty darn close to the same. So
AFC complete crapshoot at this point.
Yeah, the AFC, it's amazing how many teams actually do have winning records in the AFC. They are obviously beating. Obviously, when the AFC is playing the fodder in the NFC, they're winning. We even see that the Raiders and the Broncos got 2 of the wins against the Cowboys. That's wins in the AFC that turned into losses in the NFC. The AFC team got the tie for Detroit, but they also got another, ever many wins against Detroit. It is nice if you're in the NFC West that you're playing the AFC West is playing the NFC East, because until recently the football team, that was close, didn't want to win the game. My Eagles,
the ruby epidermis. We're going with that.
Potatoes, let's call them.
Not the Red Wolves, though. They're not going by Red Wolves anymore.
The Eagles are a nice team to beat, and the Giants are nice. So that's a bunch of wins that those teams are all getting. That's just making it interesting and exciting. Plus, the two quarterbacks from last year, the three quarterbacks from last year who are all playing at NFL levels are all in the AFC. So the youngest, newest quarterbacks, what's looking like a very capable draft class, are all over there. So it's interesting there. Something I read today is what was the Faustian deal that Andy Reid and Mahomes made to make their defense capable? Because now Mahomes can't play quarterback, but the defense is, making it so he doesn't need to. So there's that. That's a reality of what's going on over there. You want to see the rookie quarterback in Mac Jones playing Andy Reid's surprisingly good defense and Patty Mahomes. You want to see that game because you want to see those two coaches, the rivalry, the two best coaches in the NFL. We got a good coach matchup this week, which we haven't even talked about the should you have gone for two, which I've changed my mind on like 3 times. And, it's just the other – I think I'm going to let go. I think there's one wild card factor that's keeping the AFC closer than it should be, and I think it should be noted. But I'm going to hand over for a minute now and get back to me, please.
All right. JD, you got anything before we move on?
It's the next. We're getting into gut check time with the last 4 weeks of the regular season, and the one point that we didn't really touch on was that the Eagles still have a chance with the easiest schedule of their last 4 games that I have ever seen for any team, playing Washington twice, the Giants, and the Cowboys in the final game. So they still have a shot to finish in one of those last wild card spots.
Yeah, right now according to Project 538, the Eagles have a 38% shot of making the playoffs, which is not bad, considering where they were a few weeks ago.
And since they could advance without even playing a game this weekend,
it is possible.
It could go up depending on what other teams do.
Yeah.
Since we went back to the NFC, I just want to talk about the job that Harbaugh is doing, because I mentioned it briefly. Should he have gone for 2? Should he have gone for 2? I've said it already. Running backs are next man up, but it's only so deep before it's not the next man up anymore. Like if you look at Seattle, their running back situation did not survive the next man up with Carson. Tennessee did, but it's still not what it was. Be interesting to see what the New England's like, who's always just picked the next man for running back with Harris out. But they lost a bunch of running backs in Baltimore. Their defensive backfield is totally annihilated. Their offensive line is basically no more. And it's basically Jim Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson trying to win these games on fumes. I think we're going to see a collapse, not as monumental as Pittsburgh last year because they were 11-1, but I think that we are going to. But even if we do, if they can somehow get into the playoffs, I think that job that Harbaugh did this season is phenomenal, needs to be looked at. It's not going to be because everyone's going to look at what Belichick did with the rookie quarterback, but no team is left there in Baltimore. They're going to be calling us up soon to come play.
Nice. So, JD, anything to follow on that?
That pretty much does it for me.
Cool. All right. We are actually at the 4:30 mark, so 30 minutes in. Find us always on Spanglish World Sports Den on Instagram and Facebook, and SSW Sports Den on Twitter. Haha, got it right that time. But moving on at this point, we're going to be talking a little bit of baseball. Baseball, by the way, is the sport that we used to have that involved players taking the field. This time of year, usually there'd be the winter meetings. There would be certain things like free agency, trades, a lot of speculation for next year. But the big speculation right now is when is the season going to start? And I wanted to basically turn this over because I have my own opinions. Obi, you and I have talked a little bit, but I don't think you and I are in the same, frame of thinking. And JD, I kind of want to get your thoughts a little bit too. If the season is going to start, how much of an impact is this going to have on the league and anything else you guys want to have? So, Obi, you first.
Oh, thank you. I think I'm not going to even begin to prognosticate when it's going to start. I've said it a bunch of times. I think JD and I are kind of on agreement here. The owners are entrenched. The owners are looking for a solution for a sport that's dying. They need to make sure that they get some sort of deal that's going to last them a long time, and they're willing to sacrifice a lot. I don't know if it makes sense for them to sacrifice the season, but they may be willing to, because they want a lot. Because the sport, as Scott, you have been pointing out for a year plus of time on the air with me, the sport is dying. It's dying slowly. I mean, look, it's still getting 8 million viewers for its championship game. It's a lot of viewers, but it is slowly dying. It's been clearly passed by basketball. Obviously, football is king here. We know there's other sports on the way, and I know the owners need to fix that. And the question is this a product that can be saved? And if so, how are the owners going to do it? And that means they have to work with the players. And this union and this ownership do not have a trusting relationship, which makes it worse. So I don't know if you're going to get baseball this year. I'm hesitant to say you are. I do know that JD and I have talked, and I agree with him that the owners are so brazen and so risky to skip another World Series. That's probably a mistake, but they just might be that determined.
I think that there will be games lost. I think that they do come to an agreement and the season eventually starts around May 15th, June 1st, somewhere around there. I don't think you get a full washout of the season, but I do think that you basically you'll lose the entire off season, and then maybe around late January, early February, you'll start to see some negotiations in earnest that won't really get anywhere. And then it'll get to a point where they have to start canceling a few weeks of games. And then that's, I think, when they may finally make some progress one way or another. Which side comes out, which side wins in that regard, I'm not sure who that will be. But I think that there will be games missed, but I don't think the entire season will be missed. But if it is, it wouldn't surprise me, because if there's anything baseball has been good at over the past few decades of terrible management-player relations, it's that baseball is the best at shooting itself in its own foot.
Yeah,
you have players who are understandably upset over what they feel as being railroaded in the past two CBA negotiations, and then you have, but the stars are still getting their obscene contracts, $300 million and up. It's the middle class, if you will, that has gotten squeezed. Your veteran player with about 5 years experience that is looking for a mid-level contract. Those are the players that are getting squeezed out and replaced by rookies, with team-friendly deals. So the players are understandably upset by that and want to change that. Yet the owners are trying to find or want to keep that cost certainty because of the uncertainty of the entire sport. Mm-hmm. Neither side appears to really know what to do as far as changes, the fundamental changes to the game itself on the field that are required in order to make this sport viable for fans in the future, from an entertainment value, because the game to watch on TV is not entertaining whatsoever.
It's boring. It's background noise. But here's where I'm thinking about this a little bit. JD, I'm more in line to actually thinking about the way you are here, where a season could start, May 15th, June 1st, July 1st, somewhere in that ballpark. What I find most concerning about this is that both sides are talking about the game for the fans, but you're dealing with a shortened season for the second time in 3 years. Yes, obviously COVID was a completely different factor. It was a 60-game season. It was unique. It was not their doing. But COVID was the break that I think, the COVID season, the baseball season, was the break that a lot of us needed because of what COVID did to all of us personally. Sports in general have become an escapism during trying times of life. And in this case, with COVID still being a thing and everything else that's going on in society, people need an escapism. Baseball is missing that opportunity when you have millionaires and billionaires fighting each other, for the good of their own perspective aspect, while still playing the card of, we play this game for the fans. No, you don't. You play it for yourselves. You're protecting your own entity and being like to all the fans that are involved who need the escapism right now. For me personally, baseball was huge. When that came back, I was glued to that season personally because of what I was dealing with last year. And watching baseball was a great aspect of, of freedom for me. This year, this time around, with everything that people are still losing and still coping with and still dealing with, it's still very tough to see these folks going at it and being like, we care about the fans. I would love to be able to drop a few F-bombs right now. I really would. I can't though. So just imagine me dropping a few of them. You've heard me say them in other avenues before. Just imagine it right now, because you're hurting your brand in so many ways, because you're protecting your own entity more than the people that basically at the end of the day you serve. And this is what pisses me off.
I would say, since we are on an FCC safe channel, let's say that any statements about caring about the fans by any sports or player organization, doesn't matter the sport, baseball, basketball, football, wherever, it's baloney. It always is. Especially, the biggest batch of baloney was Rob Manfred's letter to the fans saying, which was just an opportunity to put out a press release dumping on the players, is we gave out $1.5 billion in contracts over the past few weeks. Big whoop. Who cares? Yeah. And Scott, I think you're half right when it comes to sports as an escapism, and how you were very engaged. And a lot of us were engaged when baseball came back because they were one of the first sports back. But who was the actual first sport back last July was soccer. Major League Soccer, and the MLS is back.
MLS is back.
MLS is salivating over the chance of a summer without MLB competition, and I think they'll do very well. And that, I think, is why the owners will eventually come to some sort of agreement and not sink the whole season, because it kind of happened last year with when they imposed the 60-game schedule, because they didn't actually come to any kind of agreement with the players, remember, regarding COVID protocols and all. They didn't really get an agreement because they went back and forth. The owners were able to impose it unilaterally. So I would not be surprised to see something similar go down with these negotiations. And also, when I say half right, as far as wanting baseball to come back,
the other half now is
there's the other half is the fact that the sports junkies like us needed that. What you have lost and what you've lost a lot of in COVID are the casual fans, the ones who catch a game here and there. Throughout COVID, because there's a lot more important things going on in the world for some people. We may not like to talk about it, but there's a lot of people where their lives don't revolve around sports. And they realized, okay, I'm wasting a lot of time here. I can do things on Sundays. Why am I wasting my time with this? And they've left and haven't come back. And you see that in the fact that TV ratings are down across the board in every sport.
Which I want to bring up.
A lot of casual fans have already been lost. Some eventually come back, but there's a lot that are gone and may not come back. And I think that will affect baseball most of all.
Here's what I'm looking at. I'm finding this interesting. I'm looking at the TV ratings for the Super Bowl all the way through. I'm going to basically target the 18 to 49 market, just in general. If you go back 5 years, Denver versus Carolina, it drew a 37.7 rating in the 18 to 49 crowd. Last game between Tampa and Kansas City, it drew a 26.5. So that in viewership, that is a 13 million viewer drop in a 5-year span in the 18 to 49 market. That is a literal 1/4 of your future fan base. And that's the Super Bowl. That's not MLB. That's not some, Well, it's worth. That is the biggest television event pretty much on the planet every single year. And you watched a 25% drop in a 5-year span.
What are those?
That-
You looked at those numbers versus baseball and basketball and other sports.
No, I
drops
just pulled
in that
it
span?
up football because I wanted
Yeah.
to use a litmus of like
There's
Go ahead.
there's a definitive asterisk on that number for football.
Which I will probably
that-
counter in a second, but go ahead.
That people watch that game who do not care about that game because they are in a place where that game is being watched and they were not there last year.
Which doesn't matter because every year you always have that. But okay, all right, we're going to get rid of this. All right, let me back this up. So I'm going to give you from 2012 to now the 18 to 49 market. Just the ratings themselves, not the viewership. 2012, Giants and New England. 40.5, 39.7, 39.3, 39.1, 37.7, 37.1, 33.4, 31, 29.9, 26.5.
Some of
That's
that drop, I think, is Tom Brady fatigue as well.
Which, okay, but in this case here, if you look at the overall over 10 years in this case, you went from 51.84 to 34.2, or you know what, screw it, 51.84 to 38.67, and that was pre-COVID. That's 13 million drop off before COVID happened. That's a hell of a drop, and that's the biggest sporting event on the planet every single year. Maybe the next generation is just getting tired of sports.
I think there absolutely is something to that, and baseball is the most affected by that. One other point about the MLB lockout is the fact that there are some conglomerates that own regional sports networks that cover about 12 mostly small market baseball teams, where the company is not doing very well. And if they lose inventory of regular season games and have to credit back the cable companies, they might go bankrupt. If broadcast rights holders go bankrupt and are no longer able to broadcast the games, I believe they would revert back to the league. So that might be part of the owner's strategy, is to try and get out of those contracts, because the regional sports network and cable bubble is popping, and that isn't where they need to. The biggest problem for the owners is figuring out where their money is coming from. When you're a regional sport and not a national sport, the local TV contracts matter. Mm-hmm. So, and there are some teams that are in terrible deals. So I think that will play into the owner's strategies as well. They won't admit it publicly, but you bet that behind closed doors, they want to get those rights back so they can try and sell them back out for more money.
But Obi, you've been kind of quiet, although I've been talking over you a little bit. Any thoughts?
I mean, I'm sure that any and everything is involved in what their choices are. In terms of, yes, if we can get our deals back and reoffer them, yes, I want to do that, presuming that they can get a better deal with the numbers that are dropping. I think we have to be careful when we say young folks aren't into sport, because I think we're showing our age when we say that. Because I'm sure there are many things, and the number one thing I'm thinking is esports that they're watching instead in droves that they would consider sports, in terms of at least it's not a scripted outcome for sure. So I think there's some of that needs to just be included when we talk about young people not into sports. They're not into our sports. And by the way, we weren't into our parents' sports, as my father was a huge baseball fan. So I took some baseball from him, but then I decided to go to football over baseball. I am a guy who was done with baseball long before this. I mean, we talk about baseball, and, I have to do my research, whereas football, I'm like, I remember I know what happened every one of the games just because I wanted to know. So I think that there is some of that we have to account for. Those numbers you did give, though, over time, those were a drastic decline for sure, not just the one game, which is why using that last game was, using the game before was a better example.
There's an asterisk on last season, but like I said, as soon as you were about to put that asterisk in, I corrected myself to let you know that I could probably counter that with what I was looking at. You hadn't seen the numbers yet. Now, I did look up esports, just in general, worldwide in this case, because it's a little easier that way. 2019 had about 400 million. 2020 had about 435 million. This year is expected to finalize at about 470. And by the year 2024, they're looking at probably about 575 million, if I do the math quick enough, of esports viewers, both enthusiastic and casual worldwide. That
Viewers where, though?
Worldwide.
No, where? What medium? Television? Internet? Twitch?
Every
because that's part of the issue, is the fact that we are now coming up with an upcoming generation of sports fans in 20-somethings that they're not cord cutting. They never had a cord, so they don't have a traditional
every internet device. Whether it's a gaming system, tablet, phone, doesn't matter. Whatever it is, they're working off of all of that. Go ahead.
So and my other follow-up question to that is, when they say that, are they talking organized events that people are watching, or are they talking my kid is watching some dude play some game on Twitch with 12,000 other people, and the guy's just playing for fun because he's like, hey guys, I'm going to do a blind run, or I'm going to do a no murder run, or I'm going to do or I'm going to play Fortnite with these 6 guys for 4 hours. You guys are going to watch, but we're not competitive. We're just a play group. Like, does those that's another question on those numbers, because I have not watched, let's call that the minor league baseball that's not on TV equivalent, but those kids are watching that in droves.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't have that number. I mean, basically, I'd have to pay for that if I want to get the actual source of it. But Statista is a solid website when it comes to stats and numbers and things that work.
Traditional Nielsen ratings are completely ignoring millions of current and potential viewers on various mediums. So those
people watch on this all the time now.
So
yes,
Scott,
and that isn't counted in the Nielsen's.
Your number, can you read what it says it's broadcasting, so we can see whether it's like
not here without having to pay for it.
But no, it just says 400 million viewers of esports.
Yeah, basically based on hardcore and casual. Yeah, see, right now.
Yeah, so that really doesn't tell if it's organized events that they're watching or not. That's the real question that you don't know.
In this case here, whether it's an organized event or whether it's not, it's showing still that growth over time because it's tapping into a younger demographic. I mean, if you look at the mobile gaming industry, that is almost, I believe it's a little over half a $1 trillion industry now. Mobile gaming itself, because everything is on there. A quick, add, play for purchase device on, game. You don't pay anything up front, but then you start paying, nickel and dime, $2, $3 here, and that stuff adds up. That's this kind of stuff that you're looking at. That is the new generation. So terrestrial television is absolutely on its way out unless something happens. As a result, people are more distracted by what's going on as far as with that than anything else. We got about 7 minutes left at this point. I want to switch gears, and thank you, JD, for the reminder. We got an MLS final coming up on Saturday. Going over to Portland, are you?
Well,
Great Northwest. Go, JD, please.
So Portland I believe, has won an MLS Cup in the past. I know they have a few final appearances. I believe they won one. I don't remember all of the results off the top of my head, but this has been quite the run for NYCFC to make it as far as they have. Was this their first playoff appearance ever, or only the second? I know it was their first playoff
This is their first time, passing the second round. They passed the first round one time. They've been in the playoffs 6 years in a row, but they only got past the first round once prior to it. And now this year, it's weird when you think of Portland and New York. New York is the Cinderella team here, and you don't typically by state think of it that way. But they've gotten some breaks. They've gotten lucky in a few different ways. The Atlanta game was a legit win, but New England, they came against a team that had a 23-day rest between two games. And even without their best player, they went up against a team that had 11 players on the COVID protocol. And I was down there in Philly. That is a loud stadium. Holy heck. New York could probably learn.
Subaru Park is a very underrated fan experience. It is fantastic there. I was at a game before COVID 2 years ago, and the stadium atmosphere there is incredible. It has the Philly fan enthusiasm, not as much obnoxiousness of Philly fans. Reddit subreddits to be accepted, but the stadium atmosphere, they'll let you hear it if they don't like something, but they're not. I personally think they're not nearly as nasty as what you get with, say, Eagles or Flyers fans.
As Obi is, an Eagle fan, I believe a Flyers fan also. Is that a little Jersey angst there, a little devil's egg? But one of the things I'll say is that when Philadelphia scored the first goal of the game at the 63rd minute, I felt the floor shake. I had that really tough situation where they're like, yeah, we can't put you in the press box. Are you okay going to the executive suite? And I'm like, let me think. Yes.
Oh, poor you.
Oh, dude, it was terrible. You're sitting there, you got the suite to yourself. You got the bathroom right there. You got, all this kind of setup. And I'm just in sports heaven here. You have no idea. You have no idea how I was feeling. But when Philadelphia scored, the floor shook. The table that I was resting on, that had a laptop on, that physically shook. And we were up, upper tier-ish. And that just shows how absolutely loud and impassioned the Philly fans are. And I give them a lot of credit. They were cool. Some of them knew that I was writing for NYCFC, and they didn't care. They showed respect anyway. I wasn't too sure for a couple of reasons, but they were respectful. They were cool. They were impassioned. And by God, NYCFC fans can absolutely learn a thing or 12 from that.
They have the Union have a very dedicated following. And this was also kudos to the Philadelphia Union this was their furthest playoff advancement in their history as well. Their first time even making it to the conference finals. But with 11 players out on COVID protocol, including their starting goalie, it was a tough battle, and they stayed in it until the 88th minute. And before that second NYCFC goal, Philly had a goal just miss over the crossbar by about 3 inches.
I was on that side.
So you're literally a few inches away from this being a much different conversation. But it was a fantastic game with Portland and their playoff experience versus the Cinderella run from NYCFC. The MLS Cup should be shaping up to be a fantastic matchup.
And that one thing I'll say on this is we're starting to wrap this up. That match was broadcast in 78 countries. So you wanted to talk about the explosive growth of MLS. Their playoff games are being broadcast worldwide. It's weird to watch. It's so weird when you're following Twitter, UK Twitter, and they're tweeting about MLS soccer because it's trending that much over in the UK. I mean, obviously, UK is Europe is impassioned with soccer, but this is minor league soccer by comparison to what they have. It was still trending over there in spite of everything.
MLS used to be the equivalent of, say, single A or double A baseball, on the world stage. Now I think they've worked their way up more to triple A.
Yeah.
So it's going to be double A and triple A depending on the team. But there is still a gap, but the gap is not as big as it was in the past.
I could go into more detail on this, but unfortunately we are out of time. But thank you for the reminder to talk about it. Obi, any final thoughts?
No, I am good. I'm very much looking forward to the soccer game this weekend, and maybe I'll sneak some F1 in next week as we get ready for a very exciting final race there.
Yeah, time flies already. That season's pretty much done. So, and actually, speaking of done, so are we. Thanks as always for tuning in. I want to appreciate you guys for that. Thank you as always to Eduardo and all the good folks over at Spanglish Sports World and Spanglish World Network. This show is also, by the way, available if you need to reach out to us at Spanglish World Sports Den on Instagram and on Facebook, and SSW Sports Den on Twitter. For myself, Mr. Obi Spencer, and of course, Mr. JD Walker, my name is Scott Schertzen. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day. I'll talk to you in a couple hours for Tales from the Film Set as we're discussing Seth Rogen, That Meltdown, HBO Max, and the worst rated thing in YouTube history. Take care.
Thank you.